very end of Prisoner of Azkaban, and I really mean just a few minutes. Bottom of page 425. Harry's having his, what I call his kind of annual debriefing with Dumbledore. He's just found out Lupin's resigned. Okay. Why does Lupin resign?
He found out he was a werewolf.
How'd they find out?
Snape let it slip.
Snape let it slip. Okay. Because he's a rotten SOB. And so Harry, speaking with Dumbledore, says at the bottom of 425, when Dumbledore sees him, "Why so miserable, Harry? You should be very proud of yourself after last night. It didn't make any difference. Pettigrew got away." Okay? Dumbledore, what do you mean it didn't make any difference? You helped uncover the truth. You saved an innocent man from a terrible fate. What was the fate that Sirius was going to experience?
Dementor's kiss.
Dementor's kiss. I mean, they'd already lined up the Dementors, so to speak. Harry thinks, Dumbledore says, terrible. That jogs Harry's memory. He thinks of the prophecy. And he tells Dumbledore about it. Okay? And Dumbledore says, 426, Harry, I think she might have been making a real prophecy. It brings her total predictions up to 2. I should offer a pay raise. So, Harry's like, he's making jokes about this. But I stopped Sirius and Professor Lupin from killing Pettigrew. That makes it my fault if Voldemort comes back. Why? What is Harry doing with what happened to that evening and the prophecy? He's thinking Peter is the one that returns. He's interpreting Peter is the one who's been chained up these 12 years. Has Peter been chained? Not literally. You could say metaphorically because he's been in a rat form. Okay, possibly. So, it's my fault if Voldemort comes back. Why? He's thinking pure cause and effect. Okay? By thinking pure cause and effect, what is he removing from Peter Pettigrew?
Free will.
Bingo. Okay? Dumbledore, it does not. Hasn't your experience with the Time Turner taught you anything, Harry? The consequences of our actions are always so complicated, so diverse, that predicting the future is a very difficult business indeed. Okay? The consequences of our actions. But he begins that with, hasn't the Time Turner taught you anything? Why? Because if you have a Time Turner, then what can you always do? You can change the future. How? By going back and changing the past. Okay? But he says, Professor Trelawney, bless her, is a living proof of that. You did a very noble thing. Predicting the future, very difficult business, Trelawney's proof. Why? 2 predictions in 15 years that she's gotten right. Out of the hundreds that she has made. You did a very noble thing in saving Pettigrew. But if he helps Voldemort come back, Pettigrew owes his life to you, Harry. You have sent Voldemort a deputy who is in your debt. Notice, Dumbledore's not saying he's not going to go back to him. He's essentially admitting, yeah, he probably will go back to him. Okay? When one wizard saves another wizard's life, it creates a certain bond between them. And I'm much mistaken if Voldemort wants his servant in the debt of Harry Potter. That is, I would be very surprised if Voldemort wants a servant who has a tie, a connection to you, who owes you something. I don't want to connect. He's like, that's disgusting. What does Frodo say when Gandalf says, Gollum has a connection with hobbits? No, he doesn't. Why? We would never do anything like he did. I don't want a connection with Pettigrew. He betrayed my parents. This is magic at its deepest, its most impenetrable. Why is it impenetrable?
Nothing can get around the fact that Harry saved his life.
Okay. Why did Harry do that? We're told a couple of things. One, he doesn't want Sirius and Lupin to be called murderers or to become murderers. 2, he actually believes what Pettigrew said about your father would show me mercy. Okay. 3, he wants Sirius to be declared innocent. Go live with him, all that kind of stuff. What else is it, though? What I've already said, it's that. He showed mercy. What is mercy? Mercy is when you have power over somebody and you don't exercise it. Okay? It's compassion. Or there's an element of compassion in it. The time may come when you will be very glad you saved Pettigrew's life. Yeah, that time will be in book 7. And maybe even earlier than that. Okay? Your father would have saved Pettigrew too. I am sure of it. How do we know? What did his father do for Snape? He saved Snape's life. Okay? Harry says, yeah, I thought it was my dad who conjured the Patronus. I mean, when I saw myself across the lake, I thought I was seeing him. He says, you do look a lot like your dad, Harry. Easy mistake. Yeah, but I mean, it's pretty stupid because he's dead. You think the dead we loved ever truly leave us? You think we don't recall them more clearly than ever in times of great trouble? Your father is alive in you, Harry. Shows himself most plainly when you have need of him. Maybe, not saying this is the case, like maybe when Harry looked in the mirror of Erised. But that need was not as great as this need. Right? How else could you produce that particular Patronus? Prongs rode again last night. And then Dumbledore explains what Sirius told him before he left about James, Pettigrew, Lupin, and Sirius all becoming animagi. Okay? So it kind of ends there. I mean, there's a little bit more. You know, there's the possibility Dean Thomas suggests maybe, you know, they'll get a vampire for their Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher next year and such. But it pretty much ends there with Harry getting his signed Hogsmeade permission slip by Sirius. Okay? And remember, the Dursleys know who Sirius is. Why? Because he'd been on our news. He'd been on real world news. Hadn't been, you know, wanted for the killing, you know, wizard wanted for the killing of a bunch of normal people. It's just, you know, mass murderer escapes. Which would be worse? I mean, do you really want Charlie Manson running loose kind of a thing? So, this novel then begins, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and how does it begin differently?
Very dark.
Okay, it's very dark. It doesn't start
On Harry's birthday.
It doesn't start with Harry. It doesn't start at number 4 Privet Drive. Okay? The books are organized or arranged in a particular fashion. It's called a ring or envelope structure. Book 1 parallels with book 7. Book 2 parallels with book 6. Book 3 parallels with book 5. And book 4 kind of sits on its own. Why? Think of a book. This is not a good one to use. Okay? This would be like books 1 through 3. This would be like books 5 through 7. What joins them? The binding. Or think of a door. A door has 2 sides to it, right? It's got this side and it's got the other side. So this serves as the hinge. These 3 books point to that. They lead to that. These 3 books they don't point back. They flow from this one. So this one's really key to understanding. It's one of the reasons why 1 through 3, relatively short, couple hundred pages. And this one's what?
Huge.
It's almost 700 pages. Okay? 635. It's over 600 pages. Okay? Why? She's packing a lot in. Well, there's another reason too. Book 1, no marketing. If you watch the introductory lecture, I go into this. Book 1 really had no marketing. Book 2 did not have very much marketing. Book 3, they started marketing. Scholastic in England started marketing. Book 4, that's when they had the midnight release parties. There were not midnight release parties for Book 3. When Book 4 was published, before you could actually hold a copy in your hand, 8 million advance copies had sold on Amazon. Before you could even see it. First time in history anything like that had ever happened. And then these, just went off the charts. Right? I think it was Book 4, when Book 4 was published, the New York Times bestseller list of books changed how they organized that list. They removed what they called children's literature from the list. Why? Because they were 1, 2, 3. Still, in 2000, these three were still in the top 3 spots on the New York Times bestseller list. This was number 1 because it had sold more than anything else. And every time a new book came out, if it had allowed it, it would have been on the New York Times bestseller list for months, if not years. Right? Best-selling books in the history of the world. History of the world. Except for maybe the Bible, but it's been around a little bit longer than these have. I think by now it's like over 500 million copies. Do the math. She goes from being penniless and poor to richer than the Queen of England in 10 years. From publication in 97 to publication in 2007. Billionaire. Because of an idea she has. Okay? So, this one begins not at number 4 Privet Drive. Where does it begin?
The Riddle House.
At the Riddle House. Okay? What should the Riddle House tell us?
Tom Riddle.
This is Tom Riddle's house. It's at Little Hangleton. Okay? And what happens at the Riddle House? This old guy named Frank Price gets killed by Voldemort himself. No longer is he attached to somebody's head. Okay? How does he appear? What's he look like? Gross? We're not kind of told. Baby-like-ish. Notice he has to drink milk from what? His snake. Snakes don't have breasts, so how does he get the milk from it? You milk a snake, a venomous snake, by prying its head open, so its fangs are like this, and you put a jar or a glass right up here underneath the base of the fangs where its venom sacs are, and you squeeze, and it squirts venom out. He drinks snake venom. Okay? So why is this opening important, though? What are they talking about? His plan. What's his plan? To come back? But we're not told everything, right? What does Wormtail talk to him about? They mention Bertha Jorkins, or Yorkins, depending how you want to pronounce that, right? Who's given information. What else? Okay. Voldemort wants who for his plan? He wants Harry. What does Wormtail suggest, though?
It could be anyone.
We could use anyone. Okay, we don't know what the plan is. But it's implied that the person that's needed needs to be an enemy of Voldemort. Which pretty much is anyone, right? Or at least any quote-unquote good or decent wizard. So why does Voldemort suggest Wormtail wants to use somebody else? Well, Wormtail does say he's protected, man. Dumbledore's got his eye on him all the time.
He thinks he has concern.
But Voldemort thinks he's showing some concern for Harry. The boy means nothing to me. Nothing at all. Well, that follows pretty quickly after what Dumbledore said, right? There's a bond. There's a connection between them. Okay? So, what happens at the end of that chapter?
Flash of green.
Harry wakes up. Yeah. Voldemort kills Frank Price. Here's a question for you. Where's Voldemort get his wand from? Well, originally, over 50 years ago. Where'd you get it from now? What happened to Voldemort at Harry's parents' house? He kills Harry's father. He kills Harry's mother. He tries to kill Harry. What happens to him physically? Becomes kind of like a spectral, astral projection, Doctor Strange-ish. He loses his body, becomes a spirit. Can spirits hold things?
Neither can physical people.
Neither can physical people. No. A spirit can't punch you. Why? Because it'll go through you. Okay? But even if you could, almost everyone assumes when Voldemort goes, pfft, his wand drops. So how's he get it? Where's it been for the last however many years? Did Wormtail sneak in and find it? We're never told.
Maybe not Wormtail, but some other servant of his that's been mentioned to be in hiding and claim that they.
Possibly, but we are going to find out who shows up pretty quickly. Sirius and Hagrid. How does Harry arrive at number 4 Privet Drive the first time? On Sirius's motorcycle, Hagrid says, I borrowed it from young Sirius Black. Okay? But Hagrid got him. Hagrid went to the house, dug through the rubble, found Harry. Sirius shows up. Hagrid borrows the motorcycle. Why? Because Hagrid can't apparate. Okay? Because he doesn't have a working one, at least. So he needs a way to get there. Back to here. So, Voldemort kills Frank Price, and Harry wakes up, thinking he's had a dream. And in the dream, he sees Voldemort, he sees Wormtail, he hears them talking about their plan, and he sees Voldemort kill some guy. And so what does he start to think? I should tell somebody. This is weird. This isn't normal. Okay? So who does he think he should tell? He kind of goes through a litany of people who he should tell. And so he thinks Hermione. What would Hermione say to do? Look at a book. I'll check out a library. See if there's anything in a library about, scars and stuff. Write to Dumbledore, etc. He says, yeah, that'd be... So he thinks, okay, I'm going to write to Dumbledore. What am I going to say? Page 21. Dear Professor Dumbledore, sorry to bother you, but my scar hurt this morning. Yours sincerely, Harry Potter. What's he think? Lame. Stupid. No. Okay, so who next? Ron. So he thinks Ron would say, you know who can't be near you, can he? I mean, you'd know, wouldn't you? He'd be trying to do you in a good... There's Ron, ever the optimist. He'd be trying to kill you again, wouldn't he? Notice, he's right. Okay? Let me ask Dad. Yeah, like his dad's going to know squat. What's his dad do at the Ministry of Magic? Yeah, it's not even Muggle relations. It's the Department of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts. Like electrical outlets. Cars. Because what does he do with those things? He collects electrical outlets. He charms cars. He's got this weird obsession with Muggle stuff. The department was probably created for him, in my opinion. Okay? So, he says, no, I'll write to Sirius. So he sends Sirius a letter. Okay? Page 25. Talks about Dudley's diet. Not going so well. Told him they'd have to cut his pocket money if he keeps doing it, so he got really angry, chucked his PlayStation out the window. Talks about, now he can't even play his Mega Mutilation Part 3 to take his mind off things. Gives us a little insight into Dudley's mind, at least from J.K. Rowling's perspective. He says, I'm okay. Dursleys are terrified you might turn up. And then he mentions just kind of in passing, oh, by the way, my scar hurt this morning. Last time it happened was because Voldemort was at Hogwarts. Well, when was that? First year. But he can't be anywhere near me now. Can he? Well, why is he asking Sirius? How would Sirius know that? Dumbledore is the one to be asking that. Okay? So, skip a little bit. He gets an invitation from the Weasleys to attend the Quidditch World Cup. What's the invitation look like?
Plastered with stamps.
Like a manila envelope covered with stamps, except for we're told, I think it is 1 square inch with the address. Okay? They don't know how to use the postal system. So, the Weasleys show up to take Harry back, and how do they show up? They use the Flu Network, okay? They're going to arrive by the fireplace, and they're going to take Harry by the fireplace back to the burrow where they live. What's the problem? Yeah, it's been blocked up, okay? So they show up in the fireplace, and Mr. Weasley blows a hole in their living room wall. It's plaster dust everywhere. If you've ever done, remodeling stuff, we're not talking drywall dust. We're talking plaster dust, which is worse. And it's just all over the Dursley's pristine house, okay? And Mr. Weasley, page 44, says, sorry about that. Okay? He says, I'll fix it, don't worry. So, the boys go and get Harry's stuff, and just before they leave, can't remember which, Fred or George drops some toffees, okay? And Dudley picks it up, and Harry's getting ready to leave, page 48. Harry says, well, bye then. Dursleys don't say anything at all. Harry moves towards the fire, but just as he reaches the edge of the hearth, Mr. Weasley grabs him by the shoulder, stops him from going in. Harry said goodbye to you. Didn't you hear him? Harry's like, doesn't matter, Mr. Weasley. Come on, let's go. Honestly, I don't care. Why? He's used to it. Why else? He doesn't care for them.
He doesn't want to start a conflict.
Doesn't want to start a conflict.
He doesn't feel like he's going to do anywhere.
What good's it going to do, really? You aren't going to see your nephew till next summer, says Vernon, in mild indignation. What's mild indignation?
He's not used to being spoken to that way.
Well, that's Mr. Weasley saying that.
Oh, yeah.
He is the one who is mildly indignated. It means slightly pissed off. So why is he slightly pissed off?
Because he can't believe how they treat Harry.
Keep going. What are they not showing
Respect.
to Harry? Respect, love, common courtesy. Someone you live with is getting ready to leave. What, at the very least, should you say? Bye. See you later. You might even say, don't let the door hit you on the way out. At least it's saying something. And we're told Uncle Vernon's face worked furiously. It's like he wants to say something, but he can't get it out. Why? Because we're told The idea of being taught consideration by a man who just blasted away half his living room wall seemed to be causing him intense suffering. Now, notice the language Rowling uses there. Vernon interprets what Arthur has said as teaching consideration. That is, Arthur is trying to teach them proper manners. This is how you be a good parent. I could be way off base here. I think that's Rowling doing that. Because all throughout these books, she does these little things where she's kind of going, okay, now, gentle reader, get the point here. Okay? And what does Vernon do? Goodbye then. Why? Because Mr. Weasley's wand was still in his hand. It's not pointed at Vernon, it's just hanging limp. But Vernon looks at that and he's thinking, if I don't say something nice, the Glock comes up. Harry, see you. And then Dudley, starts, because he's eating one of the tongue toffees and his tongue grows into a foot-long purple slimy thing, okay? Arthur fixes that. They get back to the house. Arthur explains what he had to do. Mrs. Weasley is not at all happy. Hermione is there. We're going to skip a bunch. We find out Percy is now working at the Ministry of Magic. And chapter 6, we'll go on, skip a bunch. Chapter 6, they go off to the port key. Okay? Why? Because they're going to take a port key to get to the Quidditch World Cup. Okay? At the port key, they meet whom? Cedric Diggory and his father, Amos. Describe Cedric Diggory. Handsome. Good looking. What else? Big man on campus is what we used to call him. This is the guy everybody else wants to be. Okay? What about his father? Not so much. Okay? So we're told Harry gets introduced, and Amos says, page 72, Ced's talked about you, of course. Told us all about playing against you last year. I said to him, Ced, that'll be something to tell your grandchildren. You beat Harry Potter. Well, when did he beat Harry Potter? First of all, what class? What school? What house?
Hufflepuff.
Okay. Rank the houses. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gryffindor, Slytherin.
Oh, that's interesting.
What are we ranking them in?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're
How would you individually rank them? What would be your first choice and what would be your last choice?
Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff would be last. People say Gryffindor would be here. Which do you want second? Ravenclaw or Slytherin? Okay. Some people would say, the snake lovers. Slytherin here, Gryffindor is down here, etc. What do you think Rowling suggests? Who's top?
Gryffindor.
Who's next?
Ravenclaw.
I kind of think you're right. Who's next?
Hufflepuff.
Slytherin. She's going to change that later in the series. She's going to have some things said. She makes it pretty clear. Hufflepuff, in terms of at least the founders, Hufflepuff was the one who had her head screwed on best. Okay. The others, not so much. So, you beat Harry Potter. How did he beat Harry Potter? Quidditch, okay. How did he beat Harry Potter?
Came. He passed out because of outside circumstances.
Yeah, and how many Dementors? There weren't just one or two. There are hundreds looking up at Harry. And what happens? No, not Harry, passes out and falls 100 feet. Okay? So, says, Harry fell off his broom, Dad. I told you it was an accident. Notice what Cedric is trying to do there. Be humble. Shut his dad up. He's giving an excuse for Harry. Right? Yes, but you didn't fall off, did you, boy? Why?
The Dementors weren't looking.
Okay, the Dementors don't trouble him. Why not?
He's had a fairly normal life.
He's had an easy life. What does Lupin tell Harry why the Dementors affect him more than anybody else? You've had more in your past, Harry, than others have had to deal with. Why doesn't Lupin, quiz question, why doesn't Lupin let Harry take on the Boggart, that first class? He assumes it's going to be Voldemort, but Harry says, I'm not afraid of that. It's the Dementors I'm afraid of. Why? I've faced Voldemort. He's like, well, Harry, the thing you fear is fear. We can work with that. We can take care of that problem. Okay? And he didn't want, Voldemort running around in the school, so to speak. Okay? Always modest, Star said, always the gentleman. But the best man won. I'm sure Harry'd say the same. Wouldn't you, eh? One falls off his broom, one keeps flying. It's... Notice, does Harry say anything? Does he go, no, come on, Cedric, you and me, let's go see who can fly better, Okay? So, we get the Lovegoods introduced, mentioned at least, and we go on to the Quidditch World Cup. Bagman and Crouch. Describe Ludo Bagman.
Basically, your run-of-the-mill gambler.
Run-of-the-mill gambler. Okay, what else? Do we have a modern sports figure that could fit?
He's like a cool guy.
I don't know if I'm not a baseball fan, but I do know this one because I remember when it happened. Pete Rose. Cincinnati Reds. Great slugger. Banned for life from the Baseball Hall of Fame. Why? Because he used to bet on his own games. Ludo, from what we're told, didn't bet on his own games. But he is, what? An ex-Quidditch international star. Okay? What position did he play? Beater, which means he often got nailed by the bludgers. So, he's not quite dealing with a full deck anymore. He's like the football quarterback who's been hit, 2 or 3 dozen too many times.
The boxer in the head.
Like Muhammad Ali. Watch film of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, back in the early 70s, The Thriller in Manila with Joe Frazier, man. The guy was sharp as a tack. He could speak better than anybody else. 40 years later, drool. And that wasn't only because of Parkinson's. In fact, the Parkinson's, some doctors think the Parkinson's came as a result of the boxing. Sugar Ray Leonard, same thing. Sugar Ray Leonard is not the guy that he was 30 years ago. Olympic gold medal winner, boxing champion, etc. Okay? So, what about Crouch?
Grumpy, follow the rules exactly to the T. No black and white, no in between.
Perfect. I mean, he's stickler for the rules, You step out of line, the whole weight of the law falls upon you, etc., etc. Who works for him again?
Percy.
Why? Because that's Percy.
They're the same person.
Back in, which book was it? Second book, I think. Back when they were at Flourish and Blotts getting school books, Ron notices Percy looking at a book. Prefects who gained power and their later careers. And he makes the comment, yeah, it's Percy, man. He wants power. He'll do anything for power. Big warning lights going off there. Okay? So, what happens at the Quidditch World Cup? The World Cup itself is unimportant in terms of the overall course of the novel. What actually happens there, other than we find out there's a kid from Bulgaria, Victor Krum, who can fly really, really well. Okay? But what's the importance of that chapter?
The Dark Mark.
It's what happens after the Quidditch World Cup. Even before the Dark Mark. Because what do we see? We get that wonderful scene where the Malfoys and the Weasleys see each and the Weasleys see each other at the Quidditch World Cup. We're skipping that. The Dark Mark chapter, 118, 119. We see, page 119, a crowd of wizards tightly packed, moving together with wands pointing straight upward, marching slowly across the field. They've got masks on. Their faces are masked. High above them, floating along in midair, four struggling figures. Who are those figures? The Roberts family, the people who own the property. Okay? And so, what are the figures in masks doing? Terrorizing. Is this torture that they're doing to these four humans, non-magical people? It's not nice. Are they inflicting physical pain? No, it's not physical pain. What are they inflicting? Humiliation, embarrassment. I mean, Mrs. Roberts gets turned upside down, so her dress falls, and she got on these enormous, bloomer underwear, et cetera, et cetera. Why else is this important? Because she's foreshadowing. We're going to get this exact same image later on in book 6. But it's going to be applied to somebody else. And when it's applied to that other person, Harry's going to see this, and it's going to make him second guess a lot of what he thinks about somebody that he idolizes and looks up to. Okay? So, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, etc., they have to run off, get to the forest to get away from what's going on. They run into Malfoy, Jr., and while they're in this clearing, they hear Mors Mordre, and poof, and then up in the sky is this big skull with a snake coming out of the mouth. It's the Dark Mark. And almost immediately after that, they're still in the clearing, they hear this, which are people apparating. And when Harry sees the people apparating, they're all apparating like this. And he gets Ron and Hermione to duck. And what does Amos Diggory do? Because Amos Diggory shows up, Arthur Weasley shows up, Barty Crouch shows up, Ludo Bagman shows up, and a bunch of others. And what does Cedric Diggory do? Of what? Okay. He doesn't accuse. Who does he accuse?
Cedric did this?
No.
Yeah.
Amos.
There we go.
Right? He goes off into the woods, and what do they find? Harry's wand where? With Winky. Well, who's Winky? A house elf who looks an awful lot like Dobby. Okay? They do a reverse spell on it, prior incantatum, and what does the wand do? Mors Mordre. The wand was used to conjure the Dark Mark. Harry's like, hey, that's my wand. But it wasn't Harry's voice that anybody heard. And they find the elf, and Amos Diggory kind of puts two and two together. Wand, elf, Dark Mark. Elf must have conjured it. Well, what's the implication? Notice, he doesn't take the logical next step. He just kind of leaves it hanging. That Barty Crouch must have somehow taught. Which Crouch doesn't take very well. And he tells us, let's see here. Page 136. Diggory says, "You've been caught red-handed, elf, caught with the guilty wand in your hand." And Arthur says, "Amos, come on, where would she have learned it?" So Arthur wants him to take that next step before you open your mouth. That is, before you said the elf did it, you should have thought of this. And that's when Barty Crouch says, "Perhaps Amos is suggesting that I routinely teach my servants to conjure the dark mark." And no. Notice when Amos tries to backtrack, what is that telling us about his relationship, say, with Barty Crouch?
He's his boss. Barty Crouch is
Okay, either he's his boss or what else?
afraid of him.
He's afraid of him. You have now come very close to accusing the two people in this clearing who are least likely to conjure the dark mark: Harry Potter and myself. You're familiar with his story, right? Everybody's familiar with Harry's story. Yeah. And I trust you remember the many proofs I have given over a long career that I despise and detest the dark arts and those who practice them. Well, notice how he puts that question. You're familiar with my history, right? And Amos says, yes, of course. Are we, the readers, familiar with that? No, we're not. It comes as a total surprise to us. He says, I never suggested. He goes, you accuse my elf, you accuse me. Where else would she have learned to conjure? She could have picked it up anywhere. And Mr. Weasley says, precisely, Amos, she might have picked it up anywhere. That is, the wand. Where did you find Harry's wand? He's finding it there, sure, there in the trees. Okay? So, whoever conjured it might have disapparated after they'd done it. Okay? Because what characterizes Winky's voice as opposed to the voice Harry, Ron, and Hermione heard?
Small and high.
She has a high voice like this. Because that's the same kind of voice Dobby has. House elves have high voices. The voice he heard was Mors Mordre. It was a deep voice. Couldn't have been her. Okay? So, it gets conjured, the wand gets dropped, she picks it up, and she gets fired. Okay? Hermione's all bent out of shape about that. Pick up with 142:43. Ron says, I don't get it about the dark mark. What's so scary about that? Okay. Mr. Weasley says, you know who and his followers sent the dark mark into the air whenever they killed. The terror it inspired. You have no idea, you're too young. That phrase is going to be used several times in the novel. And at one point, Sirius is going to say that to them, and Ron's going to say, you know, you old fart, you keep saying that. Why don't you try us for once? Why don't you try and tell us the truth? And Sirius gets this grin on his face. He's like, okay, I'll tell you. And the reason he gets the grin on his face is because he sees Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and who does he see?
Himself and his
James, Sirius, and Remus. No Peter Pettigrew, you know. So, they talk about the dark mark, and Harry says, what I want to know is, what were the people in masks doing? I mean, I don't get it. What's the point? Top of 143. Mr. Weasley. The point? Harry, that's their idea of fun. Half the Muggle killings, back when you know who was in power, were done for fun. What was the point? To extract information? Nope. That's what? It's how they got their jollies. It's like the sick kids, you know, who do things to cats and squirrels and dogs, and etc. Because what do studies of serial killers all show?
cruelty to animals.
They started out with cruelty to animals, okay? And then they became these kind of people, okay? So, when we come back on Friday, because we've only got about a minute left, we're going to pick up with, now we can actually talk about this real quickly. They go back to the Burrow, chapter Mayhem at the Ministry. Rita Skeeter publishes an article. Arthur Weasley gets in trouble. Percy shows his true colors. Dad shouldn't have spoken, you know. Mrs. Weasley kind of turns on him. At page 151, we're told because Arthur's got to go into work, Mrs. Weasley glances at the grandfather clock. It's not a normal grandfather clock, because what does it have? Instead of numbers, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, it has home, school, work, traveling, lost, hospital, prison, and mortal peril. And instead of hour hand and minute hand, it's got the Weasley family names. Think about this clock for a moment. Mortal peril. What happens when Ginny? First thing I do in that family is get rid of that damn clock. Because, I mean, that's just begging for trouble. Okay? Okay, when we come back, because now we're at the time, we will pick up with, chapter 11, Aboard the Hogwarts Express. So didn't quite get to where we needed to, but we got pretty close. Okay.